Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to today's webinar. You are tuned into the Cyber Effect Phase 2. And today we present to you episode 6 of a series of episodes that have been launched previously. And we continue our journey with some insight into the cyber psychology of technology, with the main theme being empowering the techno-social culture. I'm the facilitator for today's session, Zaid Hendricks, and on behalf of the Cyber Effect team hosting you today, I want to thank you for making time to be with us, even more so because it's your holidays, compounded by the fact that it's a little cold. So I hope that you are going to enjoy this session, feel inspired while you've got some hot chocolate and are under your duvets. To get you familiar with the team, we have our lead, Hafira Ishmael, our tech gurus today, Sipo, Ashrik and Jacko, as well as Albert. And then we have our chat manager, Mrs. Tracy Hopton. And then we've got a very special guest speaker today who I'll introduce to you a little later on, but she's a true pioneer in education and a trailblazer. For those who've attended the Cyber Effect sessions before, you know that it's been very insightful and very inspiring, and today we hope for more of the same. Before I get started though, and before we actually get into the nitty-gritty of the session, I just want to spare a thought for our friends and families and loved ones who are undergoing hardships in South Africa, in particular at the moment, as well as other parts of the world. They are in our thoughts and prayers. Similarly, I'd also like to acknowledge all the work, the repair work that the good people in South Africa are doing to try and restore some sense of normalcy within our environment. And then finally, I'd just like to remind you to complete the register, the attendance register, which is located in the chat feature. All of our resources and other links will be posted in the chat feature. Finally, I'd also like to encourage you to post your questions or comments in the chat manager, and we'll have a bit of a Q&A after. But please feel free to drop your questions for the duration of the session. So in terms of the Cyber Effect journey thus far, it's been a 4-month process. All of the previous recordings, all of the previous sessions have been recorded. You'll notice that there is a QR code located at the bottom of the screen. You can use your mobile device and scan it. Alternatively, the YouTube link is in the slides as well, and we'll also create a little resource folder or resource document where all of the relevant resources will be made available for you, just so that you can use it to upskill and to share and to develop your institutions, and then even more so to make sure that you empower the children at your schools especially. So today's workshop is essentially the study of technology on human behavior. And even though to a large degree our primary focus in recent times refers to the psychology around the use of the internet and social media in particular, it's important to know that technological advancement, it's gone way beyond that, and the barriers of technology continuously get broken down year on year, well, at an alarming rate. So technology includes other technologies such as virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and then also intelligence application, where intelligence application, it was a theory that was first started in the 50s, but obviously due to technological advancements, that theory then continuously changes as technologies improve. But basically, intelligence application, amplification rather, is a context or situation where humans and machines, computers, and robots work collaboratively together so as to improve a human's intelligence. And this will become more prevalent as we, sort of delve deeper into artificial intelligence, and how AI will be used to really unlock human potential. But that's a conversation for another day. Just so you know that all of these technological advancements have a psychological effect on people. And then similarly, we'll explore how these technology and social interactions incite gender-based violence, and then also cyberbullying. When it comes to the specific outcomes, in terms of understanding what the techno-social culture is, we will have a look at the impact of emerging technology on human behavior, and then also look at strategies to empower positive online behavior and action. So basically just to inspire others to have an enjoyable online experience. We also look at embracing digital citizenship, so online profiles, identity theft, address sexting, trolling, and other behaviors linked to online abuse, copyright, intellectual property, and then also linked to digital citizenship, creating a good digital footprint. And then finally, tools to protect yourself, such as cyberbullying, other cyber issues, and then also looking at wellness and the importance of privacy and some of the pitfalls thereafter, or thereof rather. So today our guest speaker is Karen Wallstra. Karen presented on the Cyber Effect webinar series previously, and she did a session with Mishka Sali on reimagining the influence of cyber safety in education, and it was an awesome session. I'd like to welcome her back, and I actually look forward to her input as she unpacks certain topics within this theme of cyber psychology today. So we're very privileged to have her. What you see on your screen is actually an abridged version of Karen's profile. And I think, truth to testament, Karen is a sort of figure of busy people always make time. And in saying that, Karen will always make time to empower others within education. And her words, she definitely is a teacher at heart. So Karen, thank you so much for being with us today. We look forward to your input, your valuable input. Yeah, so over to you.
So, hello everybody. Am I live yet? So I don't see a red block around my space.
Karen, I can confirm that your slides are up. Cyber psychology, that's what I'm seeing.
Fantastic. So hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be sharing with you today. For me, this is something which I feel is really important. And as teachers, we should really be thinking about this. So we're going to be exploring about empowering the techno-social culture within your learners, but also look at it from within yourself. So let's begin to explore. So what is the cyber psychology? Well, cyber psychology is a developing field of technology. It's continually evolving and changing, but it's studying the impact of the cyber world on the mind. And so thinking about looking at both the positive and negative impacts of technology and the use and the addiction of technology on us as people. So thinking about online behavior, your social media presence or profile, your online gaming type platforms and the influence there it has on individuals, both augmented and virtual reality and the impact that on people, and even, for example, apps and websites. So how are we using technology and how that influences us is really, really important. So then looking at all of that and saying, so how do we as people remain healthy in terms of getting a good balance in what we are using? So what do we mean by these emerging technologies which are so important? So you've got the Internet of Things, and think about how that is growing, and the things that you've got perhaps on your phone. You've got an app which might be telling you how far you've walked, or that it's time for you to be taking a break. Or what about autonomous robots, where robots are doing different things for us now, building machinery, manufacture, and now where AI has been added into those, and it's not just the machinery. And then artificial intelligence and how that is impacting us. If any of you are using apps where your phones are remembering the people whose photos you have taken, and you are now looking at that instead of remembering who the people are, or going to be able to see from a baby to a child that your phone can do that or the app can do that, that's artificial intelligence being used. Augmented reality and virtual reality, both of these I just love as technology resources and see how we could use them. 3D printing and the impact that's having on society, and big data is just slowly going to become enormous in terms of how we use it and how it impacts on us, and looking at that with artificial intelligence. And then looking at cloud computing. So if we look at all of this, it's how does this impact really on our behavior as people? And it is having an impact, but it's being aware of that. So think about the influence of technology on your everyday life. How many of you do shopping online or work? Most of us do. What about your playing or socializing within the technology space? What about just thinking? So going to do research or exploring new things. What about learning? And then what about creating? There are all these different opportunities for us to be using technology. And then what about people even falling in love, whether it's through Tinder or through other aspects? So technology can totally consume us. How do we actually control that within our spaces? So when we're looking at the techno-social culture, it's a combination of both. So it's looking at all these different technologies, whether we were using them online and offline, as well as us as society, us as individuals, our ethics, our beliefs, how society engages, looking at what influences us, how do we develop our values. And so therefore, for me, it's really important is how do we see this together? And in schools, how does that then relate to us? So our social environments, the relationships that we have. What about the communities we engage with, or the societies that we associate with or are related or associated to? And then what about our networks? So all of these things we need to consider, and then we need to think of ourselves. So it's really important in terms of how do we engage. Now, what about these children that we teach? Well, the children who are born after 1995 up to about 2009, we classify them as Generation Z. So these are our children who are sort of in our high school kind of spaces now, and they are classified as digital natives. They see themselves as social media gurus. They are online. They demand access and feel as if they totally are being disrespected if they don't have access to the internet. It's their right. They are, it's suggested that they spend about 60% of their time online, and that they have about an attention span of about 8 seconds. 8 seconds? Think of that in the lessons that you present as a teacher. They classify themselves as really independent thinkers, that they want to be out of the box, and that they really love to have their own style. Then we've got our little newbies, our Generation Alpha. Well, they also have digital footprints, and many of them have had their digital footprints before they were even born. Think of your friends who have their scans online. They have a global awareness. Even though they're really young people, they have a global awareness. They can hop onto a device, they're aware of what's happening, and they know how to use the devices. They are visual learners, so they want to learn by looking. They are very much into their mobile devices and also feel that it is a right for them to have access. And even though they are little, they are socially aware of these devices and how they can be used and how they can engage with each other. And they are described as screen agers. So think about these little souls. They were born after 2010, and they talk, oh, too many zeros. And they talk about this going up to about 2024. So if we're now looking at this techno-social culture, it involves technology, it involves our behaviors, and it involves society. And we need to decide how we're going to put an influence and a focus on these different aspects. So there've been some research by Pew Research. If you've never explored Pew, go and do that. It's really great space. But they did a study for the future of well-being and digital life. And they looked at it from 2 points of view, from what is more harmful from a technology point of view and what is less harmful. So if we look at the more harmful aspects than helpful, they spoke about being digital deficient. So a challenge for negative cognitive capabilities, analytical thinking, memory focus. So taking away our creativity, and that allowing the technology to do that rather than the individual. And we as teachers can actually change that. The other one is digital addiction. If you think about how people become addicted to gaming and spend hours and hours on games, how are we actually helping our students from a digital addiction point of view? And then what about digital distrust? The desensitized emotions. Think about the videos we're watching where we will know somebody's getting hurt, but we will laugh at it. So how are we actually not becoming desensitized? How are we helping our children not to be? And then what about your digital duress, where there's just this overload of information that we don't know where to start, that we just feeling like there's just stress all the time because there's just technology all around us. So how are we actually helping our students from that point of view? And then the last one they focused on was digital dangers. So for example, looking at human interaction, security, human trafficking, jobs and privacy, all those types of things fall into that aspect. So there is a negative side around technology, but we need to make our students aware of how do they cope with that. But then from a positive point of view, it's looking at, think of the connections, how you can actually link with each other people, that you can be having a classroom engagement with another school across the world, or that you're engaging with other people and that everything is working well. I mean, that's incredible. What about looking at commerce and government and society and the changes that we're seeing in terms of the use of technology and the benefits to people because of the use of technology? Or what about the development of new knowledge and new intelligence, where we looking at a widening array of different types of technologies that benefit health and safety, the sciences that are coming up. Just think about how we can actually be using those in our classrooms, but how our students could be doing these as jobs in the future. What about looking at the way digital life empowers people to improve or advance or reinvent their lives? Looking at self-actualization, so really looking at contentment, even with the use of technology. And then what about the continuation towards quality, emerging tools to continue quality and focus of digital life, looking at the big picture, perhaps improving educational tools, all sorts of things like that. So yes, we've got the negative, but how do we actually reinforce and build on the positive? So technology is a really useful servant. We can actually use it really effectively. But as Christian Langer says, it can be a really dangerous master. And so where do you fit in with your school? Do you allow it to be useful? Do you help it to be dangerous? Or do you teach your children how to be meaningful and responsible users? So let's look at our online reputation. What is your digital footprint? How do people see you digitally? What does your tattoo looks like? It can't just be wiped away. So be aware of what you share. Think about the images that you're creating with the posts that you share. And this you should discuss with your students often. When taking a video or a message, get the students to think about it. Is it a good quality? Is it something that they would be proud of? Would they actually want it to be shared? And then, are you happy with your digital footprint? If the children looked at themselves, are they really happy with what's being shared? Encourage them to Google themselves. Have it as a family discussion and let parents Google themselves and their children. So get the children to actually be honest about what their digital footprint looks like. Teach them to try and clean it up if it's not good. It's not always easy to do, but try and help them to actually explore that and see how can they make their digital footprints really effective. They need to think about their social online CV. Be aware of what they post, their photos, their text, their status, and they need to ask themselves, how will you affect your public or social image? This thing that I'm posting, what's going to happen with it? How does it impact my family? How does it impact my future job? And even if you're teaching in primary school, you should be having these discussions with your learners. Continuing looking at your social online CV. Are the things that you're posting polite? Are they relevant? And are they related to the topic being discussed? But most importantly, teach your children to be themselves online, to be authentic, and not to pretend to be someone older or younger than themselves. So there was a study done as long ago as 2013 that spoke about a career builder and the impact your digital footprint or tattoo has on your career. So employers removed career candidates after researching social media sites for inappropriate behavior. So 50% for proactive or inappropriate photos or information. 48% were removed for information about drugs or drinking. 33% for bad-mouthing previous employers. 30% for poor communication skills. 28% for discriminatory comments, and 24% for lying about qualifications. Teach your students to be authentic online always. And so if we go back and say that get the students to decide how they balance it and is the content appropriate. If we then look at online harassment and cyberbullying, it happens. And what studies are showing is that most teens experience some form of online harassment or cyberbullying. But how do we assist our learners from that point of view? So there was a study done again by Pew, and this was done in 2018. And they looked at students who said that they had some form of cyberbullying. And look at this, 56% of the students said that they had been listed of some form or other. 42 offensive name calling, 32% spreading false rumors, 25% receiving explicit images they didn't ask for, 21 for constant asking, where are you, what are you, so that kind of harassment, 16% for physical threats, and 7% explicit images shared of them without consent. So making students aware of what they're creating, what they're sharing, and how they should be treating each other is really, really important. So how do we teach our children to cope? Well, they need to be self-confident. They need to love themselves. So building up their self-esteem is really important. And then when they do get an incident, that they should actually think about, is it true? And then they should go and speak to a teacher or parent about it. But they should report the incident to the school and, if possible, to the website or the app. But they should need to know what are their strengths. And in some ways, they need to try and ignore the bullying and look at their self-focus. It's really difficult with cyber because it follows them all the time. But we need to empower our students. So we need, again, for them to help to find the balance within that space. But we also need to inform our parents about it. So they need to build their child's self-esteem up. They need to seek their child's strengths. They need to teach their children how to report the bullying online, at school, and they need to support their children through that. They should also teach them to try and ignore the really negative things and try to actually reflect on themselves and not so much the person who's doing them harm. Bullying has horrible, horrible issues, but we really need to think of ways to support our children as much as possible. The next kind of violence, if we look at it, is gender-based violence, and it's all around us. So think about violence against women and girls, and that we might not even be aware of. It might be happening to children in your classes. What about violence against your LGBTI people? Is that happening in your schools? Or what about intimate partner violence? Or what about domestic violence, which may be influencing the children in your classrooms? There might be overall family violence, where it's not just from one person, but maybe from more than one. Or what about the patriarchal system, where people are just asked to be quiet or just ignored? Or even indirect structural violence. So if we look at all these different types of violences, it's saying, how do we actually help our communities? Well, for me, I came across this when I worked at Google. So Gina Davis did a talk for us, and she shared with us this institute which she had formed. I now subscribe to her newsletter. And I would suggest that every teacher, especially LO teachers, should subscribe to us. And these were some of the articles that came through in the newsletters over the last few weeks. So look at this. That's a record number of LGBTQ athletes were going to compete in Tokyo. Isn't that incredible that people are now able to speak about it? Or look at Miss Nevada, is the first transgender Miss USA contestant. Or what about looking at the Academy of Motion Pictures, is looking at the most diverse board of governors in the Academy's history. I think if we just read these kinds of things and make our students aware of them, it can really benefit us as teachers and say, look what's out there, and give you discussion points. Another one which I also love is, I don't know if you know, but our president, so President Ramaphosa, a few years ago started the President's Reading Circle. And since lockdown, they've been having these virtual reading clubs. And this Thursday is their 7th session. And this popped up in my calendar yesterday. So I was just so excited because for me, he is speaking to Professor Langa, who researched these 12 young men who grew up in Alexander Township in Johannesburg. And they speaking about how they actually looked at life in terms of all its difficulties, from gender violence to patriarchy to even landing up in jail. But the book is about becoming men. And so I think it's a virtual meeting, so that's using technology, but it's looking at real lives within South Africa. And so if we're aware of these kinds of things, that's also really incredible. If you don't belong to this organization or their newsletters, please do so. It's really great. So have the discussion around the awareness and inform about gender-based violence. Don't pretend that it's not there. So create an awareness within your school. Create a platform where people can actually have the chat. Allow for the discussion to be taking place. Allow perhaps for meaningful debate among your students around it and how you can actually empower them. Encourage LO topics. Have the discussions and find them so that the lessons become really meaningful. Analyzing the violence, so looking at real data and perhaps having police or people like that to come in and speak to the students. Encourage students to report on violence, whatever kind it is, within their environment that you can perhaps try and help them. And then assist, inform and educate not just the girls, but also the boys. This shouldn't be a one-sided discussion. It should be a whole school discussion with both males and females. And then empower your girls so that they feel that they can actually speak about it. The more relevant the topics are, the more meaningful for our learners. So really engage your students as much as possible. Cyberbullying is absolutely everywhere. And Elmarie Kritzinger did this research in terms of South Africa, and it's learning through gaming. I see gaming is still black. I'm sorry, I didn't make it white. So it's school learners through gaming. And here she's saying is that 78% of her respondents actually said that they were confronted by cyberbullying in the gaming platform. That 74% had invitations to pornography. That 74% were introduced to pornography sites. That 59% had thieves obtained their residential addresses. That 57% said there was identity theft. 54% said there was airtime theft. 37% they said there were e-money withdrawals, and then there were others. So making our students aware of dangers of different platforms is really, really important. Get your students to play age-appropriate games. Make them aware that it's really important that they play games that are relevant to them. Ask, who are they playing with online? How do they meet these people? Because the online platform for gaming is worldwide. And so what are the games they are playing? What language is being used as they're interacting? And then also looking at your playing use mode for your younger little children so that they can't actually go online without you knowing. The next kind of violence, kind of intimidation, and sometimes just because of ignorance, we end up with students taking part in sexting. And sexting is the act of sending sexually explicit messages or photographs. We have heard of both young girls and young boys who have been conned into having these kinds of pictures taken, have been dared into taking them, but we need to make them aware that there really are huge implications around that. And so sexting is sending inappropriate photos or videos or trading of them. So there are consequences to this. In America, as long ago as 2009, there was a young girl who allegedly sent nude photos of herself to her boyfriend. The pictures started circulating after they'd had a fight, but the girl was charged with unruly child based juvenile as a juvenile status. So even though the boy shared it, in this instance, the girl got into trouble. And so we need to be aware of that and teach our students. From a South African point of view, if anybody is over the age of 10, can be charged either under the criminal law or under the Film and Publications Act for sending or receiving sexts. So those are sexting pictures. For example, a young girl was reported an ex-boyfriend for sexting a picture she took of herself to all his friends when they broke up. But he was charged with child pornography, and it was, but the case was diverted back to the girl who had taken the picture. So we need to have these serious discussions with our learners. And it goes back to the discussion about what is your digital tattoo? What is your digital footprint? And how is that impacting you? So the South African law states that the creation, production, distribution, possession, advocacy, advertising, or promotion of child pornography is a criminal offence. And you can get a prison sentence of up to 10 years. So we really need to say to them, if you're taking a photo, that's creation. If you're sharing it with somebody else, that's distribution. By keeping that photo on or video on your phone, that's possession. And so we need to make our children aware of the law. So how are we saying to them, what are the choices that are being made between society and technology and our behaviors? Are we making the right decisions for ourselves? So for me, we really want our children to be responsible digital citizens, to be doing the right thing. So for me, the easiest one to do is getting to teach them how to report a YouTube video. You click on the 3 dots and you report. Was it sexual content? Was it violent or repulsive? Was it hateful? Just think of some of the videos we are laughing at. Should we not be reporting those so that we don't become desensitized? Get your students to do that. Get them to decide and become proactive. What about something simple like don't text while walking? So making our students aware of something as simple as that. Being responsible, don't text and drive. This program or this Don't Text and Drive initiative was started a few years ago by a couple in America whose daughter actually died on the day she got her driver's license because she was texting. And they started this campaign where they asked people to take a pledge. It's now been taken over by a corporate, and I found it on their social media page. But it's a really good discussion to have with your students and perhaps get them to fill in the pledge, especially your students in grade 11 and 12 who are getting their learner's licenses and then going to become drivers. So teaching our students from a range of points of view how to be responsible is really important. So technologies are emerging and changing. They are changing all around us. What you're looking at here is Google's machine learning and AR Core, which is another application to create facial AR. Technology is changing. We need to decide how we're using it. Are we using it responsibly, respectfully, with good attitude? Are we encouraging students to use it really well? So how are they using the technology? How are they behaving with their use of technology and within society? How is society impacting the technology they use or their use within technology? We as teachers need to find the balance. We need to teach our students to find the balance. So thanks, everyone.
Karen, thanks so much for your input. I think one of the many takeaways, and if I can just sort of compress it down to sort of my reflection on what you spoke about, right from the top, the fact that, you know, schools are already challenging in that you've got technology that you need to incorporate within the learning environment, and manage that implementation, as well as the whole cyber safety that goes around with it. But then also linked to the generations, the fact that we've got, I think, at schools easily between 3 and 5 different generations that that we need to manage. So yeah, schools, you know, just in terms of managing the technology with the generations and people's behaviors, it can obviously bring a plethora of issues that could arise. Attached to that, though, what I want to say is that even though contexts change, what stays the same and what's always going to be timeless are our values. So it seems very appropriate that our provincial structures have gone towards, you know, sort of centering around values-driven teaching, values-driven leadership, because it's essentially our values that should guide our decision making. And in terms of Googling yourself, brilliant tip that you've shared with us. Thank you so much. I actually want to extend that further and say, look, you should also Google yourself, but from somebody else's cell phone. And this is a tip that was shared with me a little while ago. It's just that there possibly could be a variance in terms of what you Google when you are in your own profile versus what the results will be like when you Google yourself from somebody else's profile. So today's session and the whole sort of notion behind this, the cyber effect workshops, is creating advocacy and awareness, basically leading to the power of suggestion. And that if we create more advocacy and awareness around your digital footprint, your digital CV, being safe online, and basically just being a good digital citizen, that'll obviously enhance and promote a more positive culture of technology at schools. As a society, we become very reliant on technology, and the literature regarding people's digital technology use, quite rightly so, has slanted more towards using technology, creating a more positive and meaningful impact. But this is obviously if you use technology within moderation. The really severities and negatives of technology come in when we either overuse it, and then there are some real negatives that we could possibly face, such as addiction, or if we underuse it and not use it at all. And then this sort of reaches out to the concept of globalization, in that it's one of the aspects that drives globalization is the use of technology. So if we don't use technology, if we don't have the tools, we could possibly end up on the sort of end of the spectrum where we don't really achieve the kind of economic prosperity that the rest of the world is aspiring to. And we see that in economies that are really prospering due to advancements in technology versus countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where they are really falling behind in terms of their growth and development when compared to everyone else. So going back to the techno-social culture, obviously the type of, or the way that we use technology is very important. If I can sort of dumb it down to our context here. So the way that we are using technology right now, this would be a context of technology being used productively and actively, in that there's useful information, resources, tools that we will use and hopefully implement in our lives and add value to society. But then on the other end, we have got contexts where we use technology passively, and that then leads to procrastination, and it can really chew up of our time, where we're just sort of floating around in some strange person's social media account. According to studies referenced by the Center for Global Development, related to technology and its use, if we overuse technology and we are engaged for hours on end in an unproductive manner, this actually does have an impact on our ability to become passionate and empathetic. And the reason why empathy is so important is that we share our space and we share our environment with others. So being compassionate is a value that's important, and that it needs to develop. In 2020, a study was conducted on behalf of the European Union, and spending too much time on technology, it actually affects our time to sit back and reflect. And again, deep reflection is a skill that's important just in terms of our personal growth and development. Okay, so there are positive effects of technological advancements. Obviously, it's connecting with people. The fact that we can obtain information very easily, and like Karen alluded to a little earlier presentation, finding love and also just finding like-minded people. So it really does tap into Maslow's very sort of basic hierarchy of needs. The fact that, you know, we aspire to have some sense of belonging when it comes to others. So some of the positives from the techno-social culture is that there's this instant connection with others. And it's not just connecting to people, it's connecting to knowledge, entertainment, education, and we can connect anytime, anywhere. And more than that, it's affordable. Again, if we look at our context over here, all of the Western Cape, all of us are connected, and we just literally need a laptop, internet connection, some data, and we're good to go. Yeah, so earlier on, Karen also alluded to contentment, the fact that we can access knowledge and information. More than that, we get to have good insight into other people's lived experiences. That's very relatable to our experience. And then finally, in terms of crucial intelligence, in my context, honestly, when it comes to any problem that is related to technology and troubleshooting, personally, I Google everything. And truth be told, 90 to 95% of the time, I manage to sort the problem out, regardless of how complex it is. And this is one of the major advantages that I find of the internet in my personal capacity, in that, you know, as a teacher, as somebody without a technology degree, I think, you know, 90 to 95% of the time solving problems related to technology, that's quite good odds. And then finally, another positive, due to the fact that we've got access to new up-to-date information, and it is continuously being updated. It gives me great insight into just all aspects of wellness. And because of the frequency of the data being uploaded, there's always opportunities that exist that one can exploit. If we look at the amount of data that gets uploaded every single minute, particularly if we have a look at this information related to social media. Now, this is a lot of data, and this is data just based on current speeds. Now, if we are moving towards 5G and possibly even faster speeds, think about the amount of data that would be uploaded then. In 2017, 269 billion emails were sent daily. In 2021, that figure has jumped to 320 billion emails being sent. And I think even then, we didn't really experience a migration in terms of internet speeds. I think built into that gap between 2017 and 2021 was maybe the migration from sort of ADSL, LTE to 4G and fiber, and apparently the speeds of 5G even further are going to be next level. So using this data, accessing this data and information positively really does enhance your online experience. So I want to move on to the interactive part of the session. And this is just an interest survey. If you can use your device, you can either scan the QR code. Alternatively, if you can click the link in the chat, this should take you to a poll, and then the question, and if I can just show you very quickly what this looks like in the background. So this is the landing page for this direct poll, and I might as well just share this with you because this is an important tool that we need to know. I think obviously with with the lockdown levels changing, we probably going to have to have this hybrid model again, where it's a combination of face-to-face and online teaching. So just knowing what tools to use, try and encourage engagement in lessons that we administer virtually. It does become important. I mean, I've taught children remotely, and without tools to encourage interactive responses, it does make it very difficult to get input from children. So this is another thing that I just Googled. Online poll, free, direct poll came up. It is free to use. As I said, this is the backdrop. You get emailed a link, you create your poll. So you scroll on at the bottom. So this is the link that I shared with you, as well as the QR code. If I go into the results and I have a look at it percentage-wise, so okay, 7 participants. We've still got some more votes coming through. And the nice thing is, as these votes are coming through, percentage-wise, it changes. So I will go back to this page in a minute. Okay, so the very same question asked here that you had to answer, that was asked to adolescents as well. And if I can keep an eye on here. So we've got 11 votes. Let me just move on here. So according to the study conducted by the NCBI in America, so the question, the exact same question was posed to the adolescents. So basically teenage years, pre-adult years, and 31% of the respondents said that the use of digital technology creates a positive experience, versus 24% of the adolescents saying that it was negative, and then 45% saying it's neutral. Let's see how that compares to how adults have responded. So I see that in this group over here, overwhelmingly, more of us are saying that look at the use or the way that adolescents use social media and digital technology. Actually, it's not something that's advantaging them. Rather, it is a distraction, I suppose. So that's just, yeah, something interesting. I think the takeaway over here is just, look, this is just a tool that you could use to encourage interaction with your participants. Okay, so I touched on some of the positives earlier. I'm going to share another interactive tool with you, and this was used previously, but I quite like it again because it is very simple, very easy to use. It is also free. Again, if you can just scan the QR code or click the link, and then this will be your landing page here. And if you can just list some of the negative effects of digital technology use. So you will look at what specifically you mentioned over here. So what, in your view, what are some of the negative consequences then? Just to note, if you can just keep your responses short to like 1 or 2 words. How this works is that when input is given, words that are similar, they then increase in sign. So as an example, if 5 respondents put in anxiety versus 2 respondents putting in depression, the anxiety one will be quite big. So it's kind of like a word cloud, a tool that's being used here. So again, if we go into the chat, you click this link, and if you can then just start putting your input in. So what do you think are some of the negative effects of digital use on adolescents specifically? Okay, fine. I think people's fingers are quite cold, so they are just a bit slow in typing their responses. Anything yet? Nothing yet. Okay, fine. We'll move on. I can always come back to that. So some of the negatives then I identified. And this is a study done by a digital wellness coach. Okay, let me just come back and we'll hit the refresh button. Awesome, thank you. So yeah, stress, absolutely, anxiety, cyberbullying, peer pressure, disinhibition, awesome. Yeah, so very much related to the social, emotional, psychological well-being, which we will delve into a little later. So thanks so much for your input. Aunt's got another interactive tool that you can use. Just a reminder that when people give feedback, you hit the refresh button and their feedback will come through. Okay, so some of the negatives identified, and this is then specifically related to your feedback as well. So there's a digital wellness coach. Can you believe it? That's another job that's been developed that wouldn't have been around if it wasn't for technology. So digital wellness coach specifically looked at how digital technology impacts on the spectrum of wellness. So then there could be about 8 or 9 different spheres of wellness. And I'm just going to look at those that are sort of most pertinent in schools related to the techno-social culture. So I want to focus on the social aspect, the psychological aspect, and then also the emotional aspect. Even though we are constantly connected or have the platform to constantly connect, in some people though, and the context obviously differs per person, but the constant virtual connections can actually amplify loneliness, in the sense that, you know, being connected, or when it comes to techno-social culture, it sort of dictates that a big driver of your success is the size of your network. If I think about LinkedIn as an example, so we look at people's connections there, and in LinkedIn, in that program, they'll say themselves that, look, make sure that you expand your network. Networks will lead to greater opportunity. Yeah, so that is something that isn't necessarily 100% true, because it could also be the quality of your connections rather than the quantity. Another negative is that overusing technology does lead to addictive behaviors. And again, in our context, you know, if you've got your cell phone next to you and you do display some addictive behavior, and I see this in classes, if my children who I teach, if they've got their cell phones out, there's always one eye on their phone. Every now and again, very often actually, they click the home button just to check if there's been any updates since the last time they checked it 3 seconds ago. And then finally, the financial risks that it does pose. Financial also linked to that, the risk of us leaking personal or confidential information. So we look at things such as hacking, identity theft, phishing, and then also fraud. Now, I just sort of want to expand a little bit on cyberbullying and have a look at some of the concepts or some of the features of cyberbullying that takes place within schools. So online abuse in this context is defined as pervasive or severe. Pervasive in the sense that online abusers usually look for an audience to target somebody. The more widespread it is, the more impactful abusers feel that their intention is. And then severe in that, look, it just takes one email, one person to release where you live or your phone number or any personal details on social media to this wide audience, and there could be a risk of very serious consequences occurring. Okay, so some of the concepts related to online abuse, and the reason I've put deepfake on here. Now, a deepfake is basically just an enhanced form of online impersonation. And it's basically artificial intelligence using this technology called deep learning to actually create images that appear real. And I think the scary thing for me is that there are free apps to actually make very quick and easy deepfake images. And thus, this could obviously also exacerbate the problem of spreading fake news. Phishing, so this is when you receive some form of communication that you think is a trusted source. And the aim here is to trick you into doing something like opening a link or an attachment or downloading a virus. And this leads to then somebody else accessing your account online, impersonating you, or even just selling your information to somebody else. As you may or may not know, very soon data is probably going to be the new future currency. Online trolling, so this is where people intentionally leave provocative or offensive messages just in order to get attention or to upset someone. And that is essentially what they do. They, if we very easy to say it, but hard to actually deal with. If we don't walk away from these keyboard warriors and we continuously engage with them, they will continuously troll us or troll those who are responding to them. And then the last one linked to trolling would be the use of hate speech. The reason why I've put free speech up here is because it's important to note that, look, organizations are only going to become better when we are able to have very difficult conversations in a respectful manner. And this is essentially where the concept of free speech comes in. And it is this very difficult balancing act in schools that we need to try and encourage our children to look, even though it's a difficult topic, let's address it in a respectful manner. And again, this is where values are so key. Just touching on some of the aspects of good digital citizens. Again, this will ensure that our children enjoy a healthy online experience. Google's Applied Digital Skills platform, and this is the link over here at the bottom, which I will obviously share in the chat as well, is that they've got some brilliant lesson plans that you can implement in your class, in school, either on a micro or macro level, where children get to engage with technology, but then also address pertinent topics. So stuff such as respecting copyright, enhancing their digital CV, addressing issues such as cyberbullying. So just going back to this, how do we then promote cyber safety in schools. And look, I mean, there's a number of approaches, but the very first thing is if you want to establish a culture of positive technological use, essentially you want everybody to be involved and to buy in it, to buy into whatever structures or processes you are going to set up. So I think, you know, sort of management and governance responsibilities here would be to develop a good, sound IT policy linked to social media, netiquette, basically your etiquette online. Look, the important thing about policy development is that it creates a framework in which people can operate, and it protects everybody. I think what's important that related to policy, and especially when it comes to code of conduct, is that it has to be restorative. So even when you are addressing bullying, it must be to get the child to unlearn the incorrect behavior and learn correct behavior. So these are just some sort of tools or guidelines that you can sort of instill in schools to try and create more awareness, advocacy around navigating the cyberspace in a safe manner. We very shortly are going to move on to the Q&A. We're coming towards the tail end of the session. The very last interactive tool, and this is where I'll require some of your input. If you scan the QR code or click the link, this is going to take you to a Google form. And it's basically just for you to then give input and say, like, what are some of the things that you are doing in schools to try and promote cyber safety, cyber wellness. As I said, these are just some ideas. What we did in our school was just to create a little more advocacy around this, was we just once a week, every week, sent out a digital safety tip in terms of addressing cyberbullying and creating a voice for those who are afraid of, you know, their names being released when they report cyberbullying, or they are afraid of being ostracized or marginalized because of reporting bullying. We actually invested in an app called the Guardian app, where you can report bullying and any sort of unsavory instances, and ensure that your anonymity is completely protected. So if you can just click onto this link and then give your input here. This is what it looks like. And then as the responses come through, we'll filter them. Ongoing discussions with learners, excellent. Ensure that cyber culture is discussed. School assemblies, absolutely. Populating newsletters, and I like the fact that we are sharing it with parents as well. Essentially, this is a partnership. So yeah, you can continue putting your input in. From this point, just alluded to what I spoke to a little bit about earlier. This, I think, is at one point it was the most liked tweet in the world, and before it was replaced by, I think it was a post from Chadwin Boswick, some guy in the Avengers when he still died. So that's now become the most liked tweet. But yeah, just in Nelson Mandela's words, Barack Obama said, "No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin or his religion." If people are taught, and if they learn how to hate, they can, and if they can learn how to hate, they can also be taught how to love. So it's literally just about unlearning the incorrect behavior and learning correct behavior. Okay, so before I close off, let's move on to the Q&A. I'm just hinting, and then I'll hand over to Tracy Hopton.
Hi there. Thank you so much, Zahir. I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
Fantastic. First of all, incredible input. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Zahir, for your presentations. I think both of you spoke to such meaningful and relative educational point of view, but also holistic values when it comes to the home environment. The first question I have for you is, Zahir, before we look at the chat, the first question is, how do you suggest engaging the parents of our learners with these topics that both you and Karen have discussed today? So what are some models from the school you're at, or models you would like to suggest of how we can engage in terms of this topic? I know your last activity spoke to it, but what suggestions can you give our attendees today to engage in the topic of things like cyberbullying, sexting, digital footprints?
Look, as I said earlier, it's about establishing a partnership with parents. So that whatever is done at schools is reinforced at home. So I'll give you an example of what I shared a little earlier. So we shared digital safety tips with our children, with our learner body, but at the same time, we also shared digital safety tips with our parent community. So those exact same things. And I was actually amazed at the response that I got from our community, because at random times, I'd share a tip, children would respond, and similarly, parents would then also respond and relate it to how they've lived. And funnily enough, they then would share tips with me as well. So the point I'm making is that you want to create an environment where you encourage parental involvement and parental support. So you get your parents to actively participate in that. And you'd be amazed at the offers that I've received from parents to come in and do something on digital safety, because look, your parents are professionals. They work in different industries. Yeah, and cyber safety, cyber wellness is something that is important in every single industry. So I think from my side, just creating a context where we try and invite parental involvement and parental support. Karen, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
I agree completely with what you are saying. I think it's really important that we engage with our parents, because if we really want to work, it's got to be from a parental and a school point of view. It can't be one-sided. The same way as we support our parents in different aspects. So from a cyber security point of view, it works the same way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that feedback. Karen, if I can ask, and again, the question's open-ended, how can a teacher or parent encourage our learners to better manage their digital footprints? So specifically in regards to digital footprint, how could we engage or encourage the better management of their online profiles?
I think, again, it starts with a discussion. I think if we encourage parents to have the discussions with their children from when they're little around values and what's expected, because then when you have the difficult discussion around something that might have happened which isn't appropriate, that's too late. We need to have had that discussion long before then, that the parents know, the children know they can come and speak to their parents about that. And so what is your image? And that's why I think the idea of Googling, and I love the idea, Zahir, of Googling on other devices, because definitely your profile is different. But it's like sitting as a family and saying, okay, take the different phones. Okay, you Google on dad's phone, mom, and you Google on mom's phone, an older brother or sister or an uncle or an aunt, or just somebody else in the family, and seeing what comes up. Is it appropriate? And having that discussion, even with littlies, you can have the discussion in terms of what they're seeing. Is it appropriate? And I think the same goes for schools. Say to your children, take out your phones and Google me as the teacher. What comes up? Because as teachers, we need to be aware of what our footprints or tattoos are like. And so getting your children to be able to say to them, Google me, what comes up? What do you see? Is a really good example of showing that you consider it. And if they find something that's not appropriate, having the discussion around, oh dear, how do we get rid of it? You see how long ago this was, or do you see what happens, or how you can't take it off? And so it's being aware, I think, and having the honest discussions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Karen. We've got another question from one of our participants, Russell. Language use and messaging, especially the use of words and sentence construction, carry with it some emotion. Choice of words is really important. This affects all generations. So the question is, do you think this is a valid point to teach if we're having a discussion about online engagement? Karen, let's hand over to you again.
Definitely. I think for me, I suppose one of the saddest things I've heard as a teacher over the last few years is where sometimes teachers go, my children can't spell anymore. But isn't that our role? So I think it starts there with sentence construction and grammar, first of all. Second of all, then talking about texting language and is it appropriate? I think it's really important to have those kinds of discussions with the children because it impacts them, who they're speaking to. If I think of just my husband, often gets emails from people querying for jobs. And if you look at the types of emails he gets where there's no signature, there's no introduction, there's just like, I'm looking for a job. Are we not teaching our children those kinds of things? So just general communication around how do we text, how do we speak, what's appropriate to who I'm speaking to. I get irritated on WhatsApp when it's somebody I don't know, I don't have the number, and they don't tell me who I'm speaking to. They just send the message and ask you a question. They don't even say, hello, it's so-and-so, or regard so-and-so, or so I think it's really important.
Fantastic, Karen, I wholeheartedly agree. Mr. Hendricks, from your experiences in your subject or even your engagement with learners online with this hybrid model that COVID's forced us to engage in, how did you find the language use in this navigating of this space?
Language use. Look, there's a lot of emojis, a lot of exclamation marks, and I think for me, voice notes as well. But yeah, look, Tracy, definitely, I think this is where empathy is so important, and not just in terms of, you know, sort of stringing sentences and putting words together, but look, words have meaning. And I think if you aren't mindful of what you say, how you say it, you know, the core or the crux of the message that you are trying to get across will be misinterpreted. So people will then might not see the message itself, but they pick up on the underlying tone in the message. And that's where, you know, there's sort of a breakdown in communication. I think in terms of like the use of language, this is where like internet etiquette becomes so important. And also maybe video conferencing etiquette becomes important. Essentially, and it's very easy to assume that what happens in our classrooms should essentially be extended to what happens online. But the platform is different. We can't assume that our children just know these things. So that's why it's important to, you know, as part of school creating advocacy and developing resources, it's important to develop some kind of netiquette or video conferencing or you navigating the internet framework. That's where policy development becomes so important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Final question for you both, just coming full circle with the purpose of today's seminar. We started off by saying, you know, the seminar is to introduce educators to the effective technological advances and how these are affected specifically on people. So, Karen, I know you can't see the future, but what would you suggest or what do you foresee as being the biggest impact, the biggest advancement that technology has had on our individual development thus far and potentially in the future?
Well, I think AI. I really think artificial intelligence is going to impact us in ways that we can't even begin to perceive. Between that and machine learning and cloud computing, if you put all of those together, I think it's going to change our world completely in the devices we have, in the technology that's going to be developed. And so making children aware just becomes even more important, because everything is already involved with tech. And so therefore going forward, it's just going to be more so. So how do we empower our children to make meaningful decisions so that they aren't engulfed by the technology, but that they still use the technology to their advantage, but it doesn't all consume them?
Thank you, Karen. So here's the same question for you. That what do you foresee as being the biggest impact or the biggest thing that technology is having on our social culture in the future?
You know, as technology develops, new technologies are developed constantly. So I think for me, look, yes, there's a lot of research and data that exists, but at the same time, because technology develops so quickly, we can't really delve into the research when it comes to one particular competency, because look, yes, internet psychology is a big thing, but then there is also augmented reality, and then there's also virtual reality. Then there is amplified intelligence. So just this field of technology and its impact on human behavior, we haven't really sort of scraped the surface yet in terms of the amount of research that we have available, and the true measure of what its real impact is on our society. So I think the fact that technology changes continuously, that's going to have a massive impact at some point. I mean, will we actually know what the difference is between what's real and what's not? Yeah, that's where I'm sort of at the moment. That's the scary part.
A lot to consider. Thank you so much. I wanted to read a post from Bradley Dirks. Brilliant, valuable, and much needed information. Thank you. What advice do you have on getting parents involved in ensuring that our learners are mindful of cyber dangers? Is there any resources available that we can use to make our learners more aware of their digital footprints? And then are there any resources that are available? So I just wanted to start off by saying, firstly, Bradley, thank you so much. I have posted a number of resources in the chat, and I know this was this question was posted early on in our conversation, so I hope everybody that's logged on has reviewed and downloaded or saved those links. But basically, just going back to it, the big thing here is cyber dangers. I mean, I think we've all agreed that there's a lot to be celebrated and a lot to be supported by. But just over to the two of you, I think what we'd really love is that our colleagues joining us here today visit the WCD portal, that they look at the numerous resources that are constantly updated there. And the WCD portal has a variety of support documents for the classroom, for home, for parents, for educators, and you name it. But just from either of you, cyber dangers, is there any resources you found particularly beneficial, or any way that we can ensure that our learners are mindful of cyber dangers?
Okay, yeah, look, I'll go. Just there's one brilliant recent resource, and Tracy, you were involved, Karen, Hafida, were involved in the development of the online safety curriculum in high schools. That's very insightful. It talks about curriculum implementation and cyber safety across grades from grade 8 to grade 12. So yeah, that I know is a brilliant tool. If I can just sort of share my screen and show you exactly what I'm talking about. Can somebody please confirm that you are seeing the online
yes.
safety book? Okay, yeah, so this is basically, yeah, I think a dictionary, a good starting point, a good point of departure brilliant resource that covers everything around cyber safety. And the nice thing is that there's a progression from grade 8, grade 9, all the way up until grade 12. Yeah, so if I can stop sharing. So that's what I've got.
I think.
Well, I know of, yeah.
Well, that's kind that you said that. So, but I think you mentioned earlier, Google's Applied Digital Skills has some really great lessons. Excellent. And then depending on the age of your children, go and play games like Internet Awesome, which is a really good starting point, which is Google's game to make children aware. But there are really great websites such as NetSmarts. If you just Google it, there's some really great resources, and many of them are age appropriate. Some of them have got teacher resources and children resources. Some have even got spaces for parents. But there are really great websites. If you get hold of what Khafisa shared with the online safety, all the links and the references, those websites we used a lot. So have a look at those. They're a range of links. And I think it is on the WECD portal anyway.
Fantastic. Corin Zahir, thank you so much. I have posted the link for NetSmart and the WCD portal. Just from my side, I think today's session was the perfect way to refocus us as educators as we welcome back our learners on the 26th and realize that a lot of our learners have been in this cyber techno space with lockdown and all that's been encouraged through this hybrid model of education, and this social cultural conversation is more important now than ever. So thank you so much. Back to you, Zahir.
Thanks so much for that, Mrs. Hopton. On behalf of the CyberEffect team, I just want to take this opportunity to thank the hosts today, our lead, Hafida Ismail. Her details are up on screen. Awesome opportunity. She's really been sort of pioneering this venture. We have got one more episode remaining, that's heroic content creation, and that's going to be hosted on the 2nd of August. I also want to say a very special thank you to our guest today, Corin. You have been immense, your contribution. Again, it has been spot on. So thank you so much for that. Our chat manager, Tracy Hopton, and then also our tech gurus, Sipo Ashrik. I think it is, the name just leaves me now.
Albert.
Albert, yes, and one more, Jacko. Thanks for that good save. And then finally, I just want to say a huge thanks to all of our attendees today. This hour and a half and a bit has just zipped by, but it has been fun. I hope that you take all of this information back to your schools, even at home as well. Yeah, and just continuously doing the great work that you guys do. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you at the next session. So from my side, all the best to everybody for the rest of the year, the start of the term, and then all of our colleagues who are celebrating Eid al-Adha in the week, just Eid Mubarak to you as well. Yeah, and then look, just stay safe, everybody, and we hope to see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, colleagues.